In a new age of watchmen, a team of individuals, pooling their talents and abilities, come together to bring analysis, reaction, and comedy to the fold. This is their chronicle. This is Accounting Arc.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Glad to have you join us for this issue of really looking at non-traditional accountants. And with me today is Ron Baker. Ron, you are a man of so many things. I will let you introduce yourself. You can kind of share with us where you're located, what your role of maybe in the profession is, and what do you actually do?
Wow, I don't even know how to answer that, but I'm in Northern California, so I'm in the wine country. Sonoma County, Napa's in my backyard. I actually started my CPA career in a Big 8 accounting firm, and of course, that's how you carbon date a CPA, right? Do they say Big 8, Big 6, 5, 4? So I'm Big 8, so now you know how old I am. Donny, I actually knew I wanted to be a CPA when I was 15 years old.
Really?
My dad was a barber, like Charlie Brown. Like Charlie Brown's father was a barber. And I started doing his books and a bunch of his friends' books. I started doing taxes. I had a great 2-year accounting teacher in high school who was wonderful. He would bring in, like we were talking before we went live, he would bring in CPAs and also CFOs. And he brought in an FBI agent, who was a CPA. And he really exposed us to accounting just beyond doing the double entry accounting. He also taught us how to do taxes. So we ran a tax clinic during lunch in the accounting classroom. Wow. Kids would come in with their W-2s, from their part-time jobs, and I'd sit there and do their 1040 easy or whatever it was. I think it was 1040A at the time. And they'd get a refund and they'd hand me $20. And I said, I could probably do pretty well doing this. And that's how I started doing taxes for my dad's buddies and other small businesses. I was defending people in front of the IRS at the age of 17, which I'm not even sure is legal, but the customer signed a power of attorney and I went in and was their agent. So I knew I wanted to be a CPA in high school, basically. So.
Wow. And what are you doing now? What are some of the things that you're doing?
What am I doing now? So after I left the Big 8 firm after 2.5 years, and I was in San Francisco with Pete Mark Mitchell, which is now KPMG, I started my own firm. And when I started my own firm, as you know, you're everything. You're the HR person, you're the janitor, you're the marketer, everything. And I realized that I didn't know much about pricing. And I realized also that the billable hour was a lousy customer experience. So one day I asked my partner, I said, why don't we just give a fixed price? All of our customers are business owners and they give fixed prices. Why can't we? And we just started experimenting with it. And there was nobody out there on the circuit talking about it. There were no books, nothing. And we just started doing it, not because of all the economics and marketing that I teach since, but because I was reading about companies that had great customer experience. Disney, Lexus, American Express, LL Bean. I go down this long list, and I wanted to emulate that. I wanted to create a great customer experience, and we thought pricing was a big part of that. So we did it. The customers loved it. We made every mistake under the sun. We were wimpy pricers. We did none of the things that I teach now or have been teaching about offering 3 options, have a value guarantee, all these different things. But even though we were blowing it, we stuck with it because the customers overwhelmingly loved it. And because of that, I got so excited, I started teaching it to my fellow colleagues through Cal CPA and their education foundation. And then I wrote a book about it, and that was published in 1998. And that book was waved around the world by Paul Dunn and Rick Payne of boot camp fame and kind of put me on the map. That book sold 40,000 copies over 6 editions, which is kind of interesting because it was a $150 book. And after that, I sold my interest in my practice to my partner, who still runs it to this day. And started teaching and consulting and writing other books. I've since written 7 more books. And now I do a radio show with my colleague Ed Kless. We just crossed over 10 years, just crossed over our 500th show. And that's a blast. It's a live radio show every Friday, and then it drops to podcast. That's been a lot of fun and very transformative. As you know, I mean, you've done a lot of.
I enjoy that one. Yeah,
it's amazing, isn't it? That you become a better listener. You become, I think, you get better at asking questions. All of these things. It's been very transformative. Plus, you just get to talk to really brilliant people that I've read for years, and authors and other people that I really admire. We've had on a space shuttle commander. I've had on a Air Force Thunderbird, which to me is like the ultimate. But yeah, so it's been a wild ride. I would have never, when I entered the profession, I thought I would be a partner at Peat Marwick for life. I really did. And I was disabused of that after the first 6 months and realized that I had to find my own way. And I guess I kind of did.
Wow. It's kind of scary to listen to you, the parallels. So I actually first fell in love with accounting in high school also. I didn't do it for clients yet, but we ran our own school bookstore, and I was the accountant for the bookstore. Didn't do taxes, and I still don't do taxes. That's definitely not my area. But it was that very beginning in high school, kind of getting that exposure, being able to do that, which I think is sad now with a lot of the STEM focus that we see, that business education often gets put on the side, or vocational technical as a whole gets put on the side and replaced by all of the sciences. I was Big Six, so Coopers and Lybrand, which I was there when it went into PricewaterhouseCoopers as well. And then, quickly, I was like, no, definitely partners not for me. I still stayed within the industry, and now I run my own accounting firm. But we do all the non-traditional stuff. And you're kind of one of the ones I look at and I go, I want to be like him. You've got the podcast, you've got the multiple books. It's just so cool. And I love the perspective that you bring in, because sometimes I feel like the profession is so insular that no one's looking outside, and all the guests that you bring and all the things that you look at, you're looking outside and going, hey, what should we be looking at and bringing in to help improve what we do?
Yeah, I'm kind of a contrarian. I don't know. I think my dad gave me that in a gene or something, but I've always had a contrarian view and question the orthodoxy of any profession. I mean, there's a lot of orthodoxy in any profession, and I've studied the medical profession intensely. One, because I'm morbidly curious about how doctors operate and do no harm, and all of the the ethical axioms they bring to bear. But I've learned a lot from them. There's a lot of groupthink in professions. I'll just give you one quick example. A couple doctors in Perth, Australia, in the late 80s were at a teaching hospital, and they thought the diagnosis of ulcers at the time, which was true for the prior 100 years, well, stress. Ulcers are caused by stress. These doctors didn't buy it. They said, if you dig down in anybody's life, you'll find stress. It's a lousy diagnosis. It's like blaming gravity for airline crashes, right? It doesn't make any sense. And they developed a cocktail, antibiotic cocktail, and they'd have patients take it. And it was curing these ulcers. Now, these guys were in Perth, Australia, and they tried to write this up in academic peer-reviewed journals, and everybody shunned them. They said, oh, what do these guys know? Who are they giving these drugs to? Kangaroos, in the outback. I mean, this is it. Donny, it took them over 10 years to get published, to get invited to speak at conferences, to get drug companies to listen to them. They were shunned. Finally, they went on to win the Nobel Prize in Medicine. There's an incredible book on this called The Acid Wars. And it just taught me that here is an evidence-based profession. You would hope, right? They look at the evidence. They go where the science takes them. And it still took 10 years to overcome the conventional wisdom. So conventional wisdom always scares me.
Definitely with you on that. That's part of our mission at the center, is really to do the research, because you hear all the anecdotal stories and you're like, Okay, yeah, makes sense in that story, but is that truly an axiom or something that I can say this is really what happens in the real world or how this works?
Yep. I think it was Richard Feynman who said, you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. And I think that is so true, because we walk around with biases, and I walk around in utter paranoid danger that my worldview is wrong. So I'm constantly challenging it. When I hear somebody challenge what I believe to be true, I take it seriously and try to investigate it. And several times I've changed my mind. I've been wrong.
I'm with you on that. That's I think one of the things that's really missing. And I think I'm trying to remember the words you used. I think you and I have had a conversation about that, like intelligent discourse or the lack of intelligent discourse now, because it's immediately now, you don't agree with me, I'm not going to listen to you, whether it's within the profession or outside of very much outside the profession. As we look at politics and everything that's going on, it's like, I'm not going to listen to you because you're not saying the same thing, when instead it should be, I'm interested to learn your side. It doesn't mean you're trying to convince me or I'm trying to convince you. I'm just interested to learn what you know and to possibly incorporate that into my my beliefs.
Absolutely. Especially, I mean, we're a profession. And to me, anybody with a CPA behind their name is a colleague automatically. And I'm going to give them respect and pay attention to them. I mean, I can't tell you how many people that I've encountered over the years who I vehemently disagree with politically on a whole host of issues. We'd probably be at war with one another. But like if they tell me, hey, this book changed my life, I'll go read the book. I take that serious from a colleague, especially because we do have a common body of knowledge that we agree on, and we're out there, living our life doing it. So I think intelligent discourse is the only way to go. And I don't find that on social media at all.
Completely. Well, what do you find invigorating of what you do? So it's not traditional accounting anymore. Does accounting still play into the way that you do what you do, or what is it? What keeps you doing what you're doing now?
Yeah,
Because it sounds like more of a mix of maybe marketing or reporting, journalism, maybe.
Yeah, it's a great question. What do I do? I've always said when I sold my practice to my partner, I always said I went from retail CPA to wholesale, because I started working with firms, much like you do. And so I still have my feet in all the major issues going on in our profession. I'm just not doing the work at the coalface. But the things that really excite me are new ideas, new business models. So we pay a lot of attention to trying to find the next business model on the horizon, because I think business models are very, very disruptive. It was Andy Grove, the late Andy Grove, founder of Intel, who said, disruption doesn't come from new technology. It comes from new business models. And boy, if you think about Uber, Napster, we can go down this long list. Yeah, it's business models that are disruptive. So my recent book is Time's Up, which is all about the subscription business model. And I stole that from the medical profession. My model is the concierge doctors and the direct primary care doctors. There's this revolution going on in medicine. It's changing the way healthcare is delivered at the primary level, the general physician level. And everybody I talk to who has a DPC or a concierge doctor will never, ever, ever go back to co-pays and insurance, because these doctors don't take insurance. So they're kind of off the grid that way. They don't have any of the medical billing people, any of the bureaucracy. And I look at that and I'm inspired by that model, because we do the same thing doctors do. They keep us physically healthy. We keep our customers financially healthy. And I think that can also contribute to their physical well-being as well. So anything that the professions are well situated to keep people healthy, wealthy, and wiser, as Ben Franklin said. And CPAs touch all three of those when you think about it. So when I speak at high school, I tell kids, we're not in the back room crunching numbers. We're in the front office. We should have couches in our offices, because our clients come in, they tell us their life story. We know everything about our clients, probably not as much as their barber or their hairdresser, but pretty close.
I don't know. I think it depends on what you're working with, because sometimes I feel like I know, like you said, way more than I probably ever thought I would. sometimes more than I want to know, but
Oh,
at the same time, I'm like, you know what, this is that connection. And a lot of times they don't have anybody else that they can talk to about this stuff, especially when it's like the small business owner that comes. Or one of the other stories I always tell is about the CEO of a nonprofit that came to my office. This is when I still had an office. We haven't had an office for a long time now, but when I had an office, she came to my office. She was referred to me, and she ended up crying and breaking down in tears because she was like, I don't know if we can keep the nonprofit open. We serve foster kids. We have this great mission, and we ended up having this great conversation. In the end, I was like, you really need better budgeting and planning. That we can help you with. I can't solve some of the other things you said, but this I can. And in the end, she was like, can I hug you? And I'm like, of course. And we hugged it out. And, that was one of that till today still resonates with me, because I'm like, that's the impact that I want to have on clients.
that's awesome. I've been asking people, why did you become a CPA, a doctor, whatever their profession is? The number one answer between 2/3 and 3/4 of the time, and this is around the world, is to help people. And we are in that position. We are graced and blessed to have customers that confide in us, like your story tells. And that is such a humbling position to be in. It must be what doctors feel like when, you're looking up at your doctor and he's about to operate, and do a good job, doc. There's just something about that is magical.
So how do you help your clients now? You said you're the wholesale, not the retail anymore. What does that mean? Keep in mind too, a lot of times students are the listeners here. So what does that mean when you're the wholesale instead of the retail?
Working with firms rather than working inside of a firm, working with the firm to make their business better, either transforming them, transforming their business model, or helping them move from, say, hourly billing to value pricing, or maybe to subscription. We're starting to see a lot of play in that space. Coming at them with new ideas, challenging them, telling them maybe things that they don't want to hear. I'm not afraid to lose business by having opinions that, I'm in the minority on. I have no problem with that. And, our radio show, we invite guests on. A lot of economists come on our show. And if you've ever studied what the economists say, looking at our profession, because there's whole groups of them that have really studied, like the audit, especially the audit industry. And they see the problems with audit failures, with the peekaboo deficiency reports that are coming out. And Donny, they've been saying for over 2 decades that the way to reform the audit industry is to have the stock market exchanges hire, select, and pay the auditors, because the stock market exchanges, New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, S&P, they have a financial incentive to say, look, list with us. And, we make sure your auditors are independent. We select them. We pay for them. Now, they can charge for that, through membership fees in the exchange, but it's not a silver bullet solution. There are no solutions. There's only trade-offs. Would that be better than the status quo? Absolutely. Economists from think tanks, universities have been saying this for decades. Not one word has been written about it in the press of accounting. Not one.
I was just going to say that. This is actually the first time I'm hearing this. This makes sense to me. Wow.
You'll never hear it anywhere else. But, and that's why I want anybody who enters this profession, any profession, to understand its dark side, its ugly side, the groupthink, the biases, because we're subject to it as doctors. If doctors can be subject to it, we are too. Let's not kid. I mean, I'd rather have questions I can't answer rather than answers I can't question.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's interesting that you keep bringing up medical, because that's one of the professions, when I look at it, I was like, I never want us to get there. Completely overregulated, this convolutedness with all the billings and everything. So the lack of transparency and pricing and cost across the board, right? Having that intermediary of the insurance kind of sitting in the middle there, and everybody's mouths to feed all in between there, as well as pockets to line. I was like, oh, and then the specialties and how they're so insular is what I learned from talking to my doctor friends. The dermatologist doesn't talk to the general practitioner, who doesn't talk to the ophthalmologist, and dentists are not even, if you talk to the doctor, some of them are like, dentists are not even medical.
Right. They're not real doctors. Yeah. That is such a great point. The medical profession is the only profession that aren't allowed to set their own pricing. Now, when you think of it that way, that's scary. And this is why the DPC docs and the concierge docs who do subscription based, they are setting their own prices. And this is why they're offering such revolutionary care at an affordable price, I might add. We've had a guy on from Detroit, Dr. Paul Thomas, and we've had him on 4 times, and his monthly charge for his patients is $100 a month. That's it. And you are covered for anything that he's capable of doing. Now, he's not capable of replacing your knee or offering oncology services, though he will quarterback those relationships. He'll find you the specialist. He'll go to the appointment with you to make sure that specialist knows everything about your medical history, and he'll quarterback the relationship. And this is the way medicine used to be. And it's not so much the rise of specialization, because that was bound to happen, just like it's happened with us, right? Yeah. We were one of the last professions to specialize, by the way. It really happened in the 80s. Doctors started doing it in the 40s, lawyers in the 50s. But it's because the GP was kind of pulled out of the picture, which is crazy because they're kind of the general contractor.
Interesting. That one of the research projects that we're doing right now is around advisory services and whether you should be specializing, and whether even a specialized firm, whether it's a vertical specialization or a horizontal specialization, whether that firm actually does better. And we're actually finding, because, AICP and everybody has been like specialize, and we're actually finding that you need to be in the middle. The successful firms, I should say, are actually in the middle. They're kind of a balance on both sides.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I most of the professional firms that I've encountered, if you're looking at just profitability, specialization is by far and away the best predictor of obscene profit or windfall profit, if you will. Like for instance, my first senior at Pete Mark was a guy named Ron, and he does nothing but dentists here in California. And that's all he does. Anybody who comes who's not a dentist, he refers them to another CPA buddy of mine. If I told you his bottom line, he's a sole prop, 12 people, it would shock you. We're talking, he's kind of up there with Wachtell Lipton, which is the most profitable law firm in the world. If you're just looking at net income per partner, it's like 8 million a year, 9 million a year. It's amazing. Now, my measure of success is not just profit. So that doesn't excite me, but I will say this: vertical versus horizontal, specialization, vertical going deep in an industry or a type of client, like a freelance client or gig drivers or things like gig workers. Or you can do, of course, the horizontal, where you solve the same problem across a large range of different industries. I did more horizontal in my career because I was trying to kill the billable hour. Well, that applied to CPAs, lawyers, actuaries, consultants, advertising agencies. So I got to work with all of those, and they all had the exact same problem. But in my experience, I think the vertical is easier. Yeah. But it just depends on what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, same here. We're horizontal because we do business transformation across different industries, not just within firms. It's definitely more challenging there, and you see a lot more vertical within the firms themselves. But there's need for both, which is always kind of cool. And as you said too, when we were looking at the success, profit was the one thing we didn't look at, just because the availability of that information was not there. Right. Because a lot of firms are private. So we looked at all the other things, and use of technology was number one. Interestingly, number two was having a distinct culture and way we work. And then number three was having very clear staff development, continuous staff development.
Yeah. It's curious. I bet you had this feeling when you entered the profession, when I was asked why public accounting, why aren't you a controller in industry? I would say because I like the variety. I like working with different industries, a doctor one day, a manufacturer the next. Well, that's wonderful for our intellectual curiosity, but I'm not sure it's a great business model. It's kind of complex. It makes things complex, and you pay a complexity tax for that, I think.
Yeah. Well, like you said, for people like you before we started recording, both you and I are probably a little bit of ADHD. And so it satisfies that need for the,
absolutely.
Hey, look here, there, what's going on?
Yep, the fox and the hedgehogs. I'm kind of both, but the fox is more exciting because he gets to run around and check out different things.
So to get to where you're doing, which, again, is really cool. I don't think students think about like, oh, I can actually start in public and go to end up being a podcaster, a book writer, all of these things. What advice would you share with people who are interested in your career path? And how, what would be your advice?
Wow, that is so hard because I think the profession has changed since you and I went into it. And like, if you were to ask me that in 88 or something, I would have said, start at a big 8, big 6, whatever they were back then, and get your 2 years or whatever, and then start your own firm or go into industry, and then you'll make connections and doors will open and you'll find what you're passionate about and all of that. Today, I'm not so sure I would tell a young grad to go into the Big Four. Mm-hmm. I mean, you could, and I don't see anything wrong with that. You will learn a lot. The experience curve is very, very steep. The problem is, just like a steep slide, you also climb down, you slide down it really fast. And I think they have the ability to rust you out, kind of giving you the same thing over and over. So you don't have 2 years of experience, you have 1 year, twice type of thing. There's so many smaller firms that I think are doing more dynamic things. They probably have better cultures, possibly better work-life type arrangements, more flexibility, probably more customer contact than you would get at the Big Four, certainly quicker, probably more room to do advisory, to do the things that you entered the profession to do, which is probably to help people. So I'm not sure, and unless you had a passion to become an FBI agent or go into government or academia or whatever, I would say, don't hesitate to start with a smaller firm or a regional firm. It doesn't have to be a Big Four. And I think the accounting professors are still kind of preaching that route, and I think it's obsolete.
Yeah, well, that's part of why we're doing this podcast, is we kind of want to show. It's funny though how many of us back then did come from that route, but I completely agree with you. I think the better route right now is a mid-size or a large regional firm, so that you get more of the exposure. Unless, the one caveat I'll put is, unless you're planning in the end, your goal is CFO at a public firm or chief audit officer at a public firm, then definitely Big Four, because that's what you're going to get through that exposure.
Right. Or if you wanted to live in another country, maybe work for a couple of years as an expat, Big Four gives you those opportunities. But even now, Donny, I'm thinking of like outfits like Alineo, yes, that have worldwide network. You can do that with them there too. Yes. So Big Four has kind of lost some of its sheen, I think, from when we entered the profession. Certainly when I did.
But so that's, I think, good general advice. If someone wanted to end up being like you, a podcaster or writing books, what other things besides the basic accounting education would you recommend for them?
Wow. I think leaders are readers. So read, and read widely, read outside of the profession. I think everybody should read 50 books a year at least, but people tell me that's too harsh, but read, because if I didn't read, I don't know where you would get inspired by new ideas. Some of the things I read, I'm in awe of these ideas like, oh, geez, I can take this idea and bring it to our profession. And that's where true innovation comes from. It doesn't come from us looking at each other in the dirty bathwater that we all float in. It comes from looking outside at other professions and what are they doing and bringing that. So I would say read widely. I knew I wanted to be on the radio. So I had an opportunity to do a couple, 3 times a live show down in Palm Springs with a fellow CPA. And I had a blast. I mean, it was a drive-by show. We had call in, and I was talking about tax reform of all things, a boring CPA type wonky topic, but it was a huge hit. And he invited me back 2 more years. He even got to be on the air with Sonny Bono a couple months before he perished in a skiing accident, actually. Anyway, when Voice America reached out to me to do a radio show, I just glommed onto it and said, I mean, they found me. I didn't go searching for it. They found me. So that was kind of serendipity. I wouldn't even know how to give people advice to get on a radio show, but to do your own podcast, that's pretty easy now. You just buy a mic and, get some of these great tools that are out there. And then all of a sudden, when you have your own show, you can start contacting people and they'll come on your show. And we've had so many guests on, me and Ed, of people that we just completely admire, business authors like Gary Hamel, or these people who I thought would never come on have come on, and I've learned so much from these people. It's just incredible. So, and that's pretty easy to do these days.
Yeah, definitely. Well, one of the things that we often think of now is that accountants are agents of transformation. And you actually used the transformation word earlier. So agents and superheroes, we think of as having superpowers. What is your superpower?
Wow. I don't know if I have a superpower. Probably just trying to stay a step ahead of maybe where other people are. Trying to see around the corner. I'm not saying I can. I'm not saying I'm not a futurist. I think they're charlatans, but I do what Peter Drucker used to advise. Just look out the window and just kind of pay attention to what's going on. And I think economics has really helped me with that, because it kind of gives you a more global macro perspective of what's happening. That'd be the other strong piece of advice. Read The Economist. It's weekly, it's long, it's a British publication, but it's excellent writing and it's excellent journalism. Even when I don't agree with it, which is most of the time, by the way, I read them because they're phenomenal writers, and you will learn a lot. They ran the greatest ad in history. It said something like, I never read The Economist, and it said assistant manager of some company. It was a great ad. Yeah, so I forgot the question. Oh, superpower. I don't think I have a superpower. I try and keep my eyes open and stay abreast of trends and what's going on. So, and I think there's never been a more exciting time to be alive than today. I really do.
I would argue that is partly your superpower, because that is one of the reasons I listen to what you say, because I'm like, you actually see, and you can see the pattern. I mean, you mentioned you started your career in the 80s. You can see that pattern with you. And what you and Ed talk about on your show, I think, is very telling, and it's very revealing. Let me flip it now. Then, what then is your critical weakness? Like Superman, it was kryptonite. What's your weakness?
Oh, wow. Boredom. I live in constant fear of being bored. I'll take books with me everywhere, or my iPad for Kindle. Even if I'm sitting at a traffic light, I'll pick up a book or an article or something and read it, because I fear being bored. That's my kryptonite.
That's definitely a good one. Well, we thank you again so much. I think you've shared so much, and it's a very interesting perspective. Just the holistic approach, I think, that you're talking about on this. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Probably the best way is thesoulofenterprise.com. You can subscribe there. If you go to timesupclub.com, you can subscribe to the Times Up Club. There's a free forever membership, and you'll get extra bonus content on my new book. Also, you can email me at ron@VeraSage. That's V as in Victor, ERASAGE.com. And I'm happy to talk to anybody who is a CPA or wants to be a CPA, or about anything we discussed today. Always happy to converse with like-minded people and colleagues. And I'm on LinkedIn. I'm one of the influencers, so you can follow me there. Got lots of articles up there. And I'm also on Twitter at Ronald Baker.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Ron, again. And thank you out there for listening with us. We'll hope to see you on the next episode.
Awesome. Thank you, Donnie. It's been fun.
The Center for Accounting Transformation provides business professionals with a network for utilizing innovations that are ready for adoption, the training and resources necessary to apply those innovations, and an opportunity to engage the talent and community needed to further the pursuit of innovative accounting practices that drive responsible and mindful business performance. Find out more at our website, www.improvetheworld.net. And if you're interested in sharing your own transformation stories, please contact us there.